A few days ago, a tweet mentioning me caught my attention. This is a really good video response by Mike Mutzel to a video by Plant Chompers. Mike typically doesn't spend any time making such response videos. But here, Mike's main point is that people promoting specific dietary lifestyles tend to pick and choose those markers that support their often biased understanding of nutritional science. Like Mike, I've seen a few videos of his in the past that I've admired.
We need to realize Ansel Keys actually contributed some good science and helped us better understand fasting. Amazing book. I mean, this is super detailed about every little physiologic finding with prolonged starvation. And this is more the layman's overview of the Minnesota starvation experiments by Todd Tucker. An amazing read. I read this on an airplane, I couldn't put it down.
Mike has a master's in nutrition science, so I decided I better pay attention to Mike's episode to see if I deserve a slap. Ooh. The thing is, I have many reasons for being vegan, and nutrition is just one. I've always worried that those other reasons would bias my views of nutrition. The first thing that struck me was that his cover shot characterized me as being a vegan activist. What does that mean? If it means what's unfolding inside an Australian restaurant right now, I do deserve a slap.
His restaurant's now been stormed by vegan activists twice, and they didn't hold back.
The sounds you hear now are pigs screaming for their lives inside carbon dioxide gas chambers. You're responsible for their murder if you're not vegan.
Or maybe Mike put that on his cover shot to reinforce his view that I'm biased. Did I bring the vegan activist label on myself by naming my channel Plant Chompers? Probably. Ooh!
I am vegan. People ask me if I miss meat or dairy. I mean, I miss being liked.
For people who've watched my other episodes, you know I promote plant-dominant diets like the Mediterranean, Asian, vegetarian, and vegan. Every year I attend Stanford Medicine's Health Symposium, and their message is at least 75% of your plate should be whole plant foods. More is better, all the way up to vegetarian and vegan, which they characterize as super healthy. I think that's the message of Harvard School of Public Health, virtually every country's food guide, and professional societies around the globe. I think we all arrived there because the science is so clear, not because of vegan activists. To his credit, Mike explained why he characterized me as a vegan activist.
I have no skin in the game, but he appears to have some skin in the game. He's a prominent vegan activist. I believe he's had a TED Talk over on YouTube somewhere.
That TEDx talk I gave at MIT was an earth science talk, nothing to do with veganism. My master's degree is in geophysics. The point was cows have greater than 10 times the impact on land and water use and greenhouse gases than pigs or chickens, and 100 times greater than most crops. That's not disputed among earth scientists, vegan or not. I even mentioned in the talk that diets that included chicken, pork, and fish use half the land per calorie as lacto-vegetarian diets because of dairy cows. It pained me to say that because the earth scientist in me is just one reason I'm vegan. But it's the earth science data, so I had to acknowledge it. And of course, beef and dairy companies are doing a masterful job of greenwashing that fact and fooling the public. If you're wondering what my other reasons for being vegan are, I'll explain them at the end of this episode. By the way, if vegan activism means efforts like Temple Grandin's to understand cows and be more humane in our treatment of them, then I'd be very proud but unworthy to be called one. Speaking of bias, though, Mike has a lot of provocative cover shots like this one. What does it mean to juxtapose a photo of a vegan musician beside a meat-eating weightlifter? Wouldn't it be more reasonable to juxtapose meat and plant eaters who are both weightlifters? There are many to choose from. The one on the left is Simon Hill, and like Mike, he has a master's in nutrition science. So how did two nutrition scientists arrive at very different beliefs about nutrition science? And how can we know which one has the better understanding of the science? One way is to look at where they're getting their information. The guests on their shows give some fascinating insight about that. Simon and I are friends, and we've talked about two deep beliefs we share. One is we like to get out of our bubbles and hear from a variety of omnivores, pescatarians, vegetarians, and vegans on our channels. Looking back 5 years on Mike's channel, I didn't see any vegetarians or vegans. Mike has hosted carnivores, however, and neither Simon or I have made that happen yet. But Simon did post this tweet with Carnivore MD last month. When a workout turns into a 2 to 3 hour nutrition debate, nice to put the diet tribe stuff to the side, lift some weights, and share a few laughs. Possibly a discussion coming soon. The second belief Simon and I both share is that the most informed people are often scientists who are actually doing science and not just reading scientific papers. They are the people who are the actual voices behind the papers we're all reading, regardless of their dietary patterns. For example, the episode of mine that Mike responded to was with Kevin Hall, who runs studies at the National Institutes of Health. I have no idea what he eats. I only cared about the science. Often Simon and I discover a scientist who followed their own science and became vegan as a result. They can be very influential in dietary policy like Kim Williams is, and I think we should hear from them too. I can tell from Mike's episodes that he thinks many of them are loons.
So let's talk a little bit more about the big push towards a vegan or vegetarian diets from our medical institutions, including the American College of Cardiology, the American Heart Association, and more. In their 2019 guidelines on the primary prevention of cardiovascular disease endorsed a plant-based diet. And the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics stated that an appropriately planned vegan diet is healthful and nutritionally adequate and may provide health benefits in the prevention and treatment of chronic diseases. And they say that it's appropriate for all stages of the life cycle, which I think is irresponsible, almost public health malpractice.
He's very clear about his belief that veganism is activism, not science, and I respect the clarity. So I feel like I owe it to everyone to be as clear about my position as he is about his. I really don't like saying this, but here goes. Mike is the CEO of a supplements company which he founded and he promotes on his channel.
Also, friends, you know metabolic health is so important for you, and especially when it comes to supporting cardiovascular health, and that's why we created the Berberine Fasting Accelerator over at Myoscience. So check out myoscience.com, that's MYOXCIENC.com, and save on the Berberine Fasting Accelerator, a really unique product that features a purified berberine hydrochloride along with synergistic nutrients like alpha-lipoic acid and biotin that help it work better. And this, again, initiates the fasting physiology. You can take it twice a day, once in the morning, or once or twice, 2 capsules in the morning or 2 capsules in the evening.
From what I can tell, he spent most of his career selling supplements. He was previously a star sales rep for another company which sells to practitioners of some kind who sell to you. I was able to find a practitioner online easily to buy from. There are lots of supplement salesmen who are getting fabulously rich. Mark Sisson, Dr. McCullough, Liver King, and many others by constantly selling the idea over social media that you may have scary nutrient deficiencies. You need supplements to thrive. At Stanford's Health Symposium this year, we heard from a gerontologist who's conducted fascinating studies on supplements, like, for example, vitamin D on osteoporosis. This is what she had to say about supplements.
So I'm a geriatrician by training, and my patients sometimes ask me, well, doctor, what supplements can I take to perhaps help my brain or my bones or my heart or my joints? What supplements should I take? And I will say that in most cases, my answer is very simple. None. I've been fortunate enough to be in this field for over 30 years now, so I've kind of seen the vicissitudes of people who come in and they really believe that they found the thing. They found what you need, and they've shown that if you give whatever this treatment to, say, worms, mice, even primates, this can extend lifespan. And this has resulted with the government now not regulating supplements, that there are a lot of those things online that you can go out and purchase, spending easily $60 a month. And to their credit, these scientists often do what they believe in, right? But I will say that of all those things that I've watched over the years, none of those scientists are known for their extreme longevity. I'm just saying. Okay, and unfortunately, most of them have passed before the age of 80, which isn't even considered very old right now.
She wasn't referring to the judicious use of basic vitamins and minerals like B12, which almost all vegans need, and probably 20% of omnivores need when they reach my age. She was referring to high-end formulations like Mike sells. For some reason, the market for them is big among high meat-eating and muscle-building markets that Mike, Mark Sisson, Mercola, Liver King, and Carnivore MD sell to. There is a wonderful book by Rena Raphael called The Gospel of Wellness. She describes the many rigorous studies that have been performed on supplements, and their conclusions were hard to hear. Here's a sample quoting Dr. Lucinda Bateman. There's lots of good education online, but don't go hook, line, and sinker, especially after someone is making a lot of money from selling products, she says, singling out supplements for one. As soon as people are earning their living by selling these pills and products, then all credibility goes out the window as far as I'm concerned. I'll link to several of the studies about supplements in the description, and maybe I can get one of the study authors on the show. But the bottom line is, it doesn't look good. Despite a career of selling supplements and interviewing influencers, I haven't seen Mike interview scientists on their effectiveness, with one exception for omega-3s. I would have thought topic number one for him would be, do they work? Are they safe? As scientists who actually conduct rigorous studies on diseases like Alzheimer's can tell you, minerals like zinc can be neurotoxins with too much supplementation. This is Lisa Mosconi, who runs Cornell's Alzheimer's Prevention Center.
And also saturated fat, at least in our research and in many of my colleagues' research, is the combination of these fats, especially in combination with too much copper, iron, and zinc, that is really harmful to the brain in the long term.
All the scary talk about deficiencies has long had me running blood tests because I've only ever supplemented for B12, vitamin D, and modest amounts of omega-3s. But everything I've tested, including the minerals, have come back in the normal range with the small amount of supplementation I do. One of the people to stress test supplements in daily life is Simon, because he's nutritionist to many elite athletes. Here's NBA star Chris Paul on the Rich Roll podcast.
So 4 years you've been doing this. You still feel good?
Yeah.
And you're still learning. You're not going to Veggie Girl every day.
No,
Yeah.
but
I hooked you up with Simon, right?
Yes.
He should be dialing you up pretty good.
Man, listen,
right?
Simon was amazing, because for me at this point now, it's about the margins.
I've heard Simon say that elite athletes can sometimes get themselves in trouble with iron, which is often true among premenopausal women, probably more so with vegans than with red meat eaters. And yet,
Chris Paul is feeling it.
We're seeing an increasing number of vegan athletes at the top of their sports. Last year's Wimbledon finals was a battle of the vegans. The Women's World Cup is just starting, with vegan superstar Alex Morgan on the team yet again. The nutrient question is one reason I promote the Mediterranean diet so often. It covers the most bases, including omega-3s, especially if you redefine it as including salmon, even though salmon aren't native to the Mediterranean. You don't have to be as careful as both vegans and carnivores have to be. I'll link to a paper about that in the description. And you don't overdose on heme iron from red meat, which appears to shorten the lives of men and postmenopausal women. I did an episode about that. Now that we know more about me and Mike, let's get to the heart of his concerns about my episode.
And let's hear what Chris says and sort of talk a little bit, expand upon some of the things that he actually omits.
I have never seen so many measurements. Do you have time for an 8-hour episode? I didn't think so. So we'll just focus on cholesterol and blood sugar.
Okay, let's pause right there. It's not going to take me 8 hours to talk about all these different things, right?
Okay, I was a little flip about it taking 8 hours to explain. What was on my mind as I said that is I had just watched Simon's epic 6-hour cardiovascular series with lipidologist Thomas Dayspring. And I had to watch the first episode twice because it was biochem. I amused myself by thinking of what Jack Nicholson would say to me about biochem.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle
Biochem.
Son, we live in a world that has
Chemistry.
What I want to focus on here is the triglycerides. So on the low-carb diet, the triglycerides dropped about 12 points. On the vegan diet, they actually increased. Okay, now you might say, well, that's not a big deal, but this was statistically significant. And I think one of the earliest approximations of improving metabolic health is reductions in triglycerides. And so again, as Chris just alluded to, his bias here is he's very LDL focused. My bias is I'm very triglyceride and liver enzyme focused, insulin focused, also looking at ApoB to A1 ratios, as well as changes and reductions in VLDL, not just triglycerides. But when I see triglyceride increases, I think insulin resistance. And so that's what you see here. And Chris conveniently overlooked that. On the ketogenic diet, the triglycerides on average went from 75 to 63. Not a massive change, but in 14 days, I would be pretty happy with that. In contrast, on the low-fat, high-carb vegan diet, what you see here is triglycerides go from 75 to 93. If that was my client, I would be a little bit concerned about that, thinking that their metabolic health was trending in the wrong direction.
Now that I see that, I can see why people would think that I was cherry-picking markers that would make vegans look good. Point taken. Honestly, it didn't occur to me that what I was saying about lipidology would be interpreted as biased because of a diet tribe thing. I don't know what Dr. Dayspring's diet is, nor other lipidologists, and I never thought to ask. I was simply interested in knowing what the most reliable biomarkers of heart disease are, because heart disease happens across every dietary pattern. At that part of the episode, I was just focused on heart disease and would come to metabolic health later. About heart disease, I was thinking 3 things. 1, triglycerides tend to rise with refined carbs, maybe even with dried fruit like raisins. And in the study I was covering in that episode, I had noticed meals included some of both. That didn't feel like a diatribe thing to me because every diet tribe knows refined carbs are bad news, vegan or not. Number 2, I think all countries should sign a treaty banning scientists from naming things that consumers need to understand. Make it mandatory that they must be named by children's book authors. So lipids would be called something like oobleck. Cholesterol could be called ooey gooey oobleck, and triglycerides slip slidey oobleck. I had said ApoB was the gold standard, and that's what I focused on, and it takes triglycerides into account. I had toured YouTube for someone to explain it like we're 5, and the only one I found was Dr. Carvalho. So I suggested people go to his channel for an explanation. I can see now that asking people to go to another channel was a mistake, so let me try to be like a children's book author. Kids, you know those tunnels your parents sometimes drive through in your car? Well, you have tunnels in your chest, but they are full of blood. Instead of cars in your tunnel, you have little submarines that carry something that looks like earwax, kind of like yellow oobleck. Ew. The submarines deliver the yellow oobleck to various parts of your body that need it. Scientists who must have failed their writing classes named the submarines ApoB. Who knows what they were thinking? Sometimes cars speeding through tunnels crash into tunnel walls, especially if there are too many cars. Then all the other cars have to swerve around the crashed cars, and cars with bad drivers like your friend's drunk uncle, they crash a lot. Oobleck submarines crash into your tunnel walls too, especially when there are too many submarines and there are bad passengers inside. One bad passenger is named LP(a). A bad writer named it that. A doctor can tell you if you have drunk uncles in your submarines, and if you do, you should eat less candy. For cars in tunnels, more passengers in cars doesn't mean more crashes. What matters is how many cars there are. But more cars can fit in the tunnel if they're smaller, and more cars means more crashes. When a car crashes into a tunnel wall, a tow truck comes along and tows it away. When an oobleck submarine crashes, the oobleck sticks to the wall, like the gum some kid stuck under your desk at school. Ew! When oobleck sticks to the wall, it makes less room for other submarines, so they crash and pile more oobleck onto the walls. I know, you're only 5, but some of your oobleck is probably already sticking to your tunnel walls because you're American and the food we eat creates oobleck. Japanese kids don't have much oobleck in their tunnels. I did an episode about that. One day, your daddy may say it feels like someone punched him in the chest, so he goes to the doctor and the doctor says, "Oh no, too much oobleck." She tells him the oobleck named LDL is the bad kind. She gives him some medicine to reduce the number of submarines in his tunnels, and she may tell him, "You need to eat less meat." So he comes home sad, and he goes on the internet hoping to find out that she's wrong. And he discovers a nice man who says the kind of oobleck called triglycerides is really the bad kind. And anyway, he says, meat doesn't raise LDL, and the medicine she prescribed doesn't even work. Luckily, he sells pills that offer dual action protection. Your daddy checks what people are saying. Melissa said she's feeling stronger, climbing hills faster. Plus, the nice man sells pills that clean the walls of your tunnels. Not even the doctor claims her pills do that. Your daddy checks what people are saying about those pills. Bethany says the pills really curves her appetite all day. Deborah says weight lose, love it. Colleen has lost water weight and her sugar levels are down. Now your dad is happy. He gets to eat all the meat and eggs he wants, and he has at least triple protection. So kids, both the doctor and the nice man can't both be right. How do we know which one to believe? And adults, if you haven't guessed already, my grandkids do watch my episodes, and one of their fathers is a doctor, so I have to get this answer right. Lucky for us kids, there are thousands of people who went to college for 9 years just to study this question. They don't have time to be your daddy's doctor or to make videos like that nice man does. All their work time is taken up doing scientific experiments to answer this one question. So what do they say? They say that after years and years of research, lucky for us, the answer turned out to be very simple. It's the number of submarines. That's what ApoB measures. triglycerides tend to hang out more in large submarines and LDL more in small ones. For most people, there are 9 times as many small submarines as large ones, and therefore LDL is a much bigger risk factor. And ApoB is a better predictor of future punches in the chest than either LDL or triglycerides. And that's because submarines vary in how much LDL they have inside. And the LDL test measures the total amount of LDL when the important number is the number of submarines. Isn't it sad, kids, that whoever named ApoB probably failed English and the name stuck as if it were oobleck? I kid. You guys know I kid. Whoever came up with ApoB is a hero. For adults who want to go deeper and cover all the things like chylomicrons and VLDL, I like this open access paper by Tamara Dlavinovich and 5 other scientists from Canada and the Netherlands. Their healthcare is nonprofit and they weren't funded by either pharma or the supplements industry. Physiological bases for the superiority of ApoB over LDL and non-HDL as a marker of cardiovascular risk. The key graphic shows there is more triglyceride shown in blue than LDL shown in yellow in large particles. But there's more LDL than triglycerides in small particles for most people. LDL particles make up the great majority of ApoB particles in plasma. The great excess of LDL particles over VLDL particles explains why LDL, and by extension LDL-C, is such a strong risk factor for atherosclerosis, whereas triglycerides are not. And why, even in patients with very high triglycerides, LDL particles are the major drivers of risk. That isn't a bias that comes from vegan activists, it's just physiology and data. I have no clue what those authors eat, but I do know that they and dozens of other authors of respected papers just like it are scientists who try hard to follow the facts. Mike has put up quite a few episodes about his Berberine supplements. Berberine is having a moment because TikTokers are calling it the natural Ozempic alternative.
Nature's Ozempic, Day 2 update, Berberine. I am obsessed. I don't understand how this stuff is legal.
The estimates I'm seeing are Berberine is almost $1 billion supplement in the US. Some Amazon sellers say they sell 10,000 bottles a month. They are vegan supplements, so if Mike's premise is correct, the vegan activist in me would be naturally drawn to them, whereas he has no skin in the game, so he can remain objective. Far as I can tell, his episodes are very positive about Berberine. I haven't heard him report what scientists and doctors with concerns say, so let's take a look. The first is Dr. Brad Stanfield, who's not vegan. He eats the Mediterranean diet, and he's not supplement averse. He produced an episode recommending 8 of them. But he was blunt about Berberine, producing an episode saying the health industry is lying to us, and he called out one of Mike's episodes.
There was even a recent viral video that concluded that Berberine supplements shrinks blood vessel plaque and blockages.
Mike had referenced a study in that episode that made me pucker, and Dr. Stanfield shared some, but not all of my concerns.
Now, to explore the study that's gone viral, it concluded that it is justified to develop Berberine as a medicine for the treatment of atherosclerosis, or blockages of our blood vessels. It gave Berberine to 21 patients diagnosed with atherosclerosis, but not currently undergoing any treatment, and the Berberine was given for 4 months. Now that group of patients were compared to 12 other patients who were taking statins and aspirin. So it's a tiny study, it's not a randomized controlled trial, and it only lasts for 4 months. Plus, it used Doppler ultrasonography, which is not a great measure for atherosclerosis. The results, therefore, are uninterpretable because of the poor methods used in the trial. It's disappointing to see that the study has been overinterpreted and popularized.
I know, many people don't like Big Pharma because there are awful cases where money has corrupted them. But being regulated, at least they have to prove their medications work and are safe via rigorous trials by good scientists. Many drugs have failed those trials and were kept off the market, such as a long string of Alzheimer's medications. Those trials are very expensive and they require good scientists to conduct them. And even when those drugs fail their trials because good scientists found problems, the scientists are required to disclose their funding, and then the internet just loses its mind over them being in the pocket of Big Pharma. The supplements industry has no regulations like that, so people can brazenly promote supplements on the weakest of science. And they don't have to mention safety. There are good consumer-accessible articles about Berberine. This one in Forbes was written by Bruce Lee, who's a professor of health policy. He wrote, "Now one thing is clear. Don't take Berberine if you're breastfeeding. You can transfer Berberine through your breast milk to the newborn, and Berberine may inhibit a newborn's liver from removing bilirubin from the blood. Too much bilirubin in the body can lead to jaundice, which in turn can lead to brain damage and other bad stuff. The New York Times interviewed professors who cautioned about mixing berberine with other medications like metformin, also anticoagulation and blood pressure drugs, because the combo can be dangerous. The Washington Post also warned about breastfeeding mothers, but they added a warning about pregnant women because they said berberine can pass through the placenta. It added that the most common side effects of berberine are nausea and diarrhea, and if symptoms persist for more than 2 weeks, stop taking it. Back to ApoB. If you're wondering about what Simon and Dr. Dayspring talked about for 6 hours, here's some highlights.
Now, once you have high triglycerides, here's an interesting part of the story. Triglycerides may or may not have elevated atherosclerotic risk. Above 500, you have pancreatitis risk. But below 500, do you or the triglycerides put you at risk for atherosclerosis or not? And it may or it may not, believe it or not. And it all depends, is the triglycerides associated with high ApoB? If so, you're in trouble. If you have an elevation of triglycerides and your ApoB is normal, you have very little cardiovascular risk. And there's a simple reason. In some people, as trigs goes up, it delays the clearance of your ApoB particles, and therefore ApoB goes through the roof. As you treat trigs in those people, you shorten the plasma residence time of mostly their LDL particles, and ApoB goes down.
If the therapy is all about ApoB, and that's what we're really trying to lower, keeping in mind the sort of 20% of the population where there is discordance between LDL cholesterol and ApoB, why do most of the standard blood tests still measure LDL cholesterol and not ApoB? Why do you have to ask for it?
There's a tragic answer to that. If I could control the guidelines and I say, I'm the king of the world right now, tomorrow every lipid guideline will say, doctors, you must get ApoB to goal in every person under your care. Citizens, make sure your doctors get ApoB to control. It would require massive educational efforts that are just not going to happen. And until a guideline says to do it, no third-party payer is going to pay for it.
I noticed that Mike was promoting the ApoB to A1 ratio, which was hard for me to understand. Dr. Dayspring didn't hold back about that.
Look, for years I was an associate editor of the Journal of Clinical Lipidology. If anybody ever sent in a paper with these silly ratios, total cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, ApoB to ApoA1, that would be thrown in the garbage can and rejected, because we've got better markers.
I would spend time on the ApoB to A1 ratio, but this episode is already long, and I'm getting a jillion requests about the triglyceride to HDL ratio that Paul Mason and Ben Bickman promote, which is kind of related. So I'll save them both for the next episode. I made an episode about Ben Bickman that has 80,000 views with hardly any pushback, far as I can tell. So I was hoping I wouldn't get buried in questions about his co-author, Paul Mason. But Paul is very charming, confident, and super popular, and he has a message everyone wants to hear, which is your LDL doesn't matter.
G'day, I'm Dr. Paul Mason. This lecture is about the science, which contradicts nearly everything I learnt about LDL in medical school.
Mike also makes very bold and confident statements about heart disease, so I wondered what guests he hosted about it and found a couple. The first was Thomas Cowan. Here's his Wikipedia entry. Thomas Samuel Cowan is an American practitioner of alternative medicine, author, conspiracy theorist, and former medical doctor. He relinquished his medical license in 2020. I made an honest effort to listen to that episode, but my ears started to bleed.
Dr. Cowan, as you probably could tell from that introduction, is very smart, and he's going to make a compelling case that the heart is actually slowing down blood flow. It's not a pump. It's almost like a brake.
However, the other heart disease interview was with Bill Harris, who's a great scientist. Just like Mike views me through the lens of a vegan activist, I can't help viewing Mike through the lens of a supplement salesman.
So back in 2009, when SpectraCell licensed your technology, I was a sales rep for essentially indirectly for you, selling the omega-3 index testing to doctors, and I got really excited about it back then.
Dr. Harris doesn't sell supplements, but his lab does sell omega-3 tests so you can know what your levels are, called the omega-3 index. That's cool, I use them. Might this be a useful sales tool to sell omega-3 supplements? On Mike's supplement company site, he has an article claiming your omega-3 index is not increased by healthy eating, implying you need supplements, and he has several pricey formulations for you. And yet, Dr. Harris plainly says eating fish raises your omega-3 index.
So it tracks with how much fish you eat, typically writ large as a population.
I had listened to several of Dr. Harris's interviews and hadn't heard him say that cholesterol is not the heart disease marker to focus on like Mike's cover says, so I eagerly listened to the interview. Here's what Dr. Harris actually said.
This is a risk marker. This is just like cholesterol, like blood pressure. This is a risk factor.
In other words, the omega-3 index is an additional marker, not a replacement for cholesterol. But Bill did say a couple of myth-busting things that I thought would have been fascinating for Mike's audience who are into grass-fed beef and avoiding the oils.
I thought for sure, I'm going to be hovering around 7.
Well, you mentioned, grass-fed beef
yeah.
and stuff. And I think there's a misconception that they are rich in omega-3. Well, they're not. They have all these stomachs, and part of their digestive system is to bacteria to chew up grass and other stuff they're eating. And the bacteria hydrogenate polyunsaturated fatty acids. They destroy polyunsaturated fatty acids. Just even feeding fish oils to cows, which the only thing I know it does is reduces the CO2 or the methane, the farting.
Mm-hmm.
Even that is not going to get it into the meat because it can't get past that stomach without getting destroyed by these bacteria. But it's not a source. Don't eat that instead of salmon. There's, I think, good evidence that higher omega-6 levels in the blood are protective against cardiovascular disease and diabetes.
But those points simply got a polite nod, nothing in the title or description. That interview was from 3 years ago, reposted last year. But in the meantime, there were 2 large trials run by very good teams, and they provided disappointing results for omega-3 supplements. Simon interviewed Dr. Harris after they came out.
Another trial came out about 2 years later, which was with about 4 grams of EPA plus DHA in a different kind of form. It's called a free fatty acid form. And it showed no benefit at all. I mean, my concern about these big randomized trials is that we're treating omega-3s like drugs and not like nutrients. And I think we're asking more of a nutrient than you ever should ask.
Interestingly, Simon promoted a vitamin/mineral/omega-3 supplement in that interview called Essential 8. Among the things it contains are zinc, iron, selenium, and iodine, things I don't take because my levels seem fine from eating food, and I'm not aware that more is better. But I don't get the sense that promoting an array of advanced supplement formulas is what drives Simon. By the way, my daughter just reminded me on the phone that I sometimes take turmeric and ginger supplements when I'm not eating a lot of spicy dishes. So I'm not a total supplements basher. Moving on, another point Mike made about me is I discounted how important near-term weight loss can be.
When people get initial weight loss, like over the course of 2 weeks, Chris kind of brushed it off as, oh, that's water weight, it's no big deal. You create a lot of an inertia initially. And so that helps people stick with the program. They start to notice their pants are feeling a little bit looser. Their friends are looking at them and saying, hey, you look leaner. Like, what's going on? Your face looks like tighter. And that helps create more progress. So I don't think we should diminish initial early water weight loss as insignificant.
Okay, point taken. Mike's right. I wish it weren't so because evidence is piling up that chronic ketosis beyond occasional fasting is bad for longevity and long-term cognition. I did an episode about that.
He appears to be a very skinny individual. I mean, yeah, very academic, very smart. Doesn't have a lot of muscle mass. Clearly doesn't eat sufficient protein and or weight lift.
Hey, I resemble that remark. I think I'm happy to hear Mike's impression because getting to race weight is hard in my age group of ancients. My teammates are younger guys and I can't let them down. My wife just gave away a big box of medals and only kept the ones where I got on the podium in big races. But no worries, I completely understand. Every fast endurance athlete gets skinny shamed and they're used to it. Last thing, woohoo, almost done with this episode.
What Kevin didn't look at here, to the best of my knowledge, is the insulin. They're just looking at glucose. It would be very interesting to look at the insulin. So if you're going to make the assertion that a ketogenic diet is causing atrophy of the beta cells, let's see what the insulin is. And for some reason, Chris omitted that aspect of the study. If it was published, I'd be curious to know why he did that.
That's a fair question. As you can see, insulin was a big part of the study, both post-meal and fasting insulin. It was very much top of mind for study author Kevin Hall. For people on the low-fat vegan diet, insulin rose after the meal and then returned to about the levels of people on the keto diet. My question was, if the pancreas is never called upon to produce much insulin, Does it become like the brain, bones, or muscles where you use it or lose it? What prompted the question is after 14 days on the keto diet, test subjects could no longer pass a glucose tolerance test. I had recently done an episode about Roy Taylor's research in the UK, who I think is a giant in the field of type 2 diabetes research. His team showed that as type 2 diabetes progresses, the pancreas shrivels up. And they showed that if you catch it before it's too late, by losing weight via any means possible, some people can see it regrow over 2 years.
There is a really wasted, raggy pancreas.
That's somebody with type 2 diabetes?
With type 2 diabetes. 5 months later, it hasn't much changed. It's certainly not increased very much. But after a year, it's decidedly increased. After 2 years, it's well on the way back to normal.
Here's a question I've had for a long time, but have never found an answer to. If you eat foods that flatten your glucose curve, does the pancreas regrow? Did you put your diabetes into remission, or did you simply mask the symptoms by not asking the pancreas to do what it was able to do before you got diabetes, like eating a plate of fruit? My understanding of Roy's research is you have to lose the weight, not just mask the symptoms, and the type of food you eat is secondary to the amount of weight you lose. That's the question I was asking in the episode Mike commented on, because I was surprised to see you could no longer pass an oral glucose test after only 2 weeks in ketosis, until you got the pancreas used to eating some carbs again. Maybe I need to get Roy Taylor on the show and ask if he's seen patients regrow their pancreas simply by eating a keto diet but without losing the weight. He promotes an 800-calorie-a-day liquid diet until the weight is gone, followed by a Mediterranean diet, by the way. So Mike, if you're watching this, I did find your perspective fascinating, and hopefully I learned a few things about making my episodes clearer. I know you're suspicious of vegans, and I'm suspicious of supplement manufacturers, but maybe if we ever do meet, we can laugh about it over an avocado. So my other reasons for being vegan, in no particular order: antibiotic resistance.
The bacteria are fighting back, and they're defeating the drug.
Correct.
Pathogens.
Salmonella sickens and kills more of us than any other foodborne pathogen.
Pollution.
Everyone in North Carolina knows that pig poop can be a big problem, but there's not a lot of agreement about how to solve it.
Pandemics.
Today, almost all the meat we eat comes from farms like this. What worries scientists is that that also makes it an ideal environment for the pathogens that cause pandemics.
And cruelty to animals. I won't show clips of that, but my bet is Ezra Klein will end up on the right side of history in predicting future generations will look back in horror at what our generation is doing. And for those of you still here in this long episode, thank you so much. I fret when an episode goes this long, but usually when I get called out for something afterwards, it's because I glossed over something like triglycerides. And that's because I threw it overboard out of the episode because I was afraid the episode was too long. Anyway, thanks so much for watching this whole long thing.